Hello and welcome to the Michael Mamas Show. I'm your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple in the mountains of western North Carolina. And today, I even struggle a little bit about the title here, but I decided to call it The Anatomy of Life, the Dance Called Existence. And what really got me thinking about all this was this thing with Will Smith, Scotty, and he slapped what's the guy's name?
Chris Rock.
Chris Rock. Yeah, he slapped, and the reason is because Will Smith's wife has some alopecia disease thing where she doesn't have any hair, and so he made some comment, and it really set Will Smith off. So right in the middle of what was it, the Academy Awards, Scotty?
Yeah,
he goes up and slaps him, and it's really made the news a lot. I imagine most of you know that, but I just found the perspectives on it. I think they missed the real point of it, at least from my perspective. And it was actually something I understand that Will Smith said. Oh, and I also want to get into Denzel Washington, what he said about it. But anyway, what Will Smith said about it was he said in his position, Scotty, he's getting bashed all the time, tabloids, Inquirer. And he said it well, how they just spin everything and none of it's true or all of it's distorted. And they trash your life, And I think right there is what that whole thing was about. He wasn't hitting Chris Rock. I mean, he was, but on a deeper level, he wasn't. He was, and he even said it, he was lashing out against all of that had been building up inside of him, a whole plethora of attacks that have been going on through years ever since he got well known. Does that make sense, Scotty?
it does, but I'm not like buying the rationale. But
What do you mean?
That they're always getting slammed or whatever, because I don't know if you know too, she has some kind of podcast or red table where they air all of their dirty laundry and things like that. Talk about how they're not faithful to each other. They sleep with they have an open marriage, and they're laying it all out there, and it's like all of this is part of it seems to me kind of part of the, I'm keeping them relevant,
I think that's probably all true, but I also think that, can you imagine being a public figure? And even in my life, I'm a little known. I'm not anywhere near known as well as anybody like that. Certainly not. But just the stuff that comes up and the things that go through the rumor mill, and the way it spins and gets worse and worse, and it just tears you apart. There's this thing. It might just be a little thorn, Scotty. But nevertheless, if you have a thorn in your toe, even though it's such a small thing, that's all you think about all day long. Those things eat away at you. And you don't have to take my word for it. That's what Will Smith said. And it was a brief thing that he said, I think later on during the Academy Awards it was. I saw the video of him,
Yeah.
And then here's how it gets even more interesting, I think, is that Denzel Washington, which I think he's a great actor, and I like him quite a bit. But he made a comment, and he said to Will Smith, I guess, directly, I would assume. But anyway, he said something about, when you're getting on top. I think he used the word on top. When you're on top, you have to be very careful, because that's when the devil comes to get you. And I thought, all these things we can look at on a kind of a superficial level, or we can go really deeply with them. And that's kind of what I want to do in this podcast is, let's go a little deeper with it all. But it's such a true point. There's negativity inside of people. And the negativity, that's Kali Yuga. That's the age we live in. the Rakshasas, the negative energies, if you will, dwell inside of people. And so there's a polarization there, you know, and it creates perspective. And so by virtue of these polarizations, and it can be based on different things, resentment, jealousy, maybe. Who knows what goes into what spins the negativity into a certain perspective. And I mean, when he said that, it just, maybe I'm projecting. I don't think so, though, because that's what he said. Is it just got to him? He boiled over, you know?
I was wondering, in that part, because I remember when he said that,
Oh, you did? Yeah.
And I'm looking at, him thinking, yeah, that's when, when you're on top, that's when you have to be careful, because the way that you react to things and what you do, that's the devil that can come in, and all of a sudden, how do you handle that power? How do you handle all of those things? What are you?
It's a good point. It's both.
Yeah.
I mean,
There's
the
stuff
devil
coming at you,
doesn't.
but yeah.
Yeah, the devil doesn't just
Devil
dwell
made
in
me do it,
them; it dwells in everybody.
Right.
Yeah, it's the state of the world today, you know. But now, let's generalize this. Let's generalize it. What is this world created out of? What is it, this universe, this prapancham, you know? What birthed it? Well, if you look at even the Vedic literature, I just love the structure of the Vedic literature. I've lectured about it, and I keep trying to find ways to. It's so beautiful and so profound. I keep trying to find ways to bring it out that kind of intrigues people. And because by and large, if you get up and you start talking about Upangas, Vedangas, Idihasas, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Vedanta, Karma Mimamsa, all that, people get lost. And then they lose interest pretty quickly, generally speaking. But if you really look at the anatomy of that, what is it? It's the anatomy of existence. It's the anatomy of life. It's what makes the world go round. And what is it built out of? What is all this made of? It's made of perspective. It all comes from perspective. This is the universe, the world, the prapancham of perspective. That's all there is. And if it's too much to get into, well, how's that chair sitting over there? How's that a perspective? How's that? Then let's not go. We don't have to go that deep. We could, but let's not. Let's first just take it from the thing of interactions with people. Let's just keep it on that level, if you want. It's all built out of perspective. And it's a dance we're doing within the arena of perspective. And there's this one component of Vedic knowledge, Vedic literature. It's like the culmination of Upangas, which is, if you want to look at it that way, in a sequential sense, and it's called Vedanta. And I guess I have a bit of a pet peeve about it, because it's see, the whole Vedic literature is about taking a step back and looking at the whole dynamic without losing oneself to it, without taking the notion of Vedanta and turning it into a perspective and a philosophy. And then you memorize all that. And so now you say you get Vedanta and you go out and start teaching Vedanta. That is so not it, and it's such a compromise of it. We're talking about states of being here, states of existence. And to try to take that and turn into a philosophy doesn't work. It's a little bit, I've talked about this, I think even on the podcast, haven't I, Scotty, about taste of a strawberry.
Yeah.
You can study strawberries your whole life. You can get a PhD in what strawberries taste like. If you've never tasted a strawberry and you got your PhD, somebody hands you a strawberry, says, what is this? You bite into it. You can say, I don't know what that is, but I can guarantee it's not a strawberry. I know all about strawberries, and that's not one. And that's the arena we're in. When we talk about Vedanta, it's a state of being. It's not a philosophy. It's not an attitude. You know, I remember once I was giving a lecture, and that Socrates quote, you know, the only true knowing is knowing that you know nothing. And that was the last lecture I gave until, you know, we had a summer break. And I heard the first day back, someone came back and said, all summer I kept telling myself, I know nothing, I know nothing, I know nothing, I know. And that's not it. You know, and talking about taking it and turning it into a perspective, you know, it's not about perspective. And it's not about identity with perspective. It's about living a state of life that is beyond perspective. So you're in the world, not of it. You see, in Vedanta, it's kind of like the integration of Karma Manasa, Sutras of Jaimini, which are really beautiful, by the way, to read. But it's Karma Mimamsa. It's the laws of karma, the laws of action. And then you have in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, Maharishi Patanjali talks about Kaivalya, deep silence, no thingness, that which lies beyond thingness. And so Vedanta is kind of like the integration of the two. When you're in the world, but not of it. Kind of like what Lord Krishna said to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, Mahabharata. He said, Yogastha Kuru Karmani, you know, Yogastha Kuru Karmani, what does that mean? Well, that's the beauty of Sanskrit, really, is, you know, you can pick it up on different levels. On one level, you might say it means take your mind to infinity, you know. On another level, it would mean established in being, Kaivalya, perform action, Karma Mimamsa, you know, that kind of a thing. And there's when one's being is established like that, then they can look out at the world and really experience it in a, you know, Vedantic sense, if you want to say that, where, you know, nothing is happening, and it's all just a play of perspective, you know. And life lost in that world, life of that world, everybody's reaching out for a perspective. They want a perspective. They want an understanding. They want a perspective they can cling to. They want to, and so if they want to understand Vedanta, they want to turn it into a perspective, but then it's not Vedanta anymore. You see? Am I making sense, Scotty?
Yeah. And it's wild how everybody wants their perspective to be number one on the hit list, too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And if you're not adhering to their perspective, then you're on their hit list.
Right.
Yeah. And that's what makes the world go round. And that's where I went immediately when I heard Will Smith, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, we get conditioned by karma. This is all just a dance of karma. And what underlies it is Kaivalya. And if you turn that into a perspective, then you've compromised it immediately. Vedanta is, if you want to call it a perspective, you'd say it's a perspectiveless perspective, you know? And then they allude to the witness. See, and you talk about the witness and how, you know, you know, you're just witnessing everything that's going on. You're not really a part of it. And there are people that try to practice that. It's kind of like a karma yoga technique where, okay, I'm raising my hand here, but it's not really my hand. And all this is going on, but really nothing is happening. And an attempt to convince themselves of that. Even if they get very successful at that approach, what they've done is they've indoctrinated themselves into a perspective so fully that they've created a dissociative state in their psyche. And so where do they go with that? Now they think they're enlightened. Nothing's really happening. Nothing's really happening. Nothing's really happening. No, that's not it, you know? And that's why you see, we can talk about these things and we can gain insight into these things, but our relationship with those insights has to be really healthy. Otherwise, we decide that we're an expert in Vedanta when we don't really know, with a capital K, really know what it is we're talking about. Yeah. You can get a PhD in Vedanta, and it doesn't mean you know what you're talking about, you know?
Yeah. Michael, is it? I just had a thought, and I don't know if I'm going to put this right, but if you're looking out kind of the window of your spaceship, right, and
Mm-hmm.
you can see all of the perspectives, all of the possibilities, there's the infinite number. The rules of engagement of where we are, you have to pick one of those perspectives, because that's just the way it works. You have to choose one.
You're
Now,
in the world. You're
yeah,
functioning. You're
right.
functioning in the world of perspective, and therefore it's through perspective that you're functioning.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but so that all those perspectives are always there. You have to pick one. So you pick one, but it may or may not be right. You have to course correct. You have to whatever. You have to be able to wipe that slate clean after you've picked that perspective, so that you can now, you know, the wisdom. Problem is when we keep going back to the perspectives that we've grabbed in the past, and and it connects all those dots, kind of.
Wisdom, is aligning with the perspective that best serves the moment,
right?
You know, and what determines that? What determines the perspective that best serves the moment? Well, it's not indoctrination. It's not a logical process. It's a state of being, established in Kaivalya, established in being. Then you perform action, and then you spontaneously align with the perspective that best serves the moment.
Well, now also we've got to understand that the rules of that we're playing with too, we have that like chit involved.
I love that you brought up the word rules twice, because you see, in the structure of Vedic literature, in the structure of that, all that knowledge is a whole arena called the Upangas,
right?
The 6 systems of philosophy, if you will,
right?
And though even that, see, right away you turned into a philosophy and compromised it, you know. But the first one, it talks about rules, basic rules, you know, and then it builds on that, and then it culminates in, you know, Vedanta, if you want to look at it sequentially like that. And so now the Upangas, there's something called the Shastras. The Shastras are kind of like guidelines, rules to follow, if you will. And so it's sort of like the Upangas are like if divinity was viewing our process and trying to help us out with it, so to speak. That whole dynamic, you see, creates what's called the Shastras, rules of action, rules of life, you know. And so it in that sense, it can be looked at as an aid and assistance to living what's called a dharmic life. Now, dharma, what's dharma? Dharma isn't like the 10 Commandments: do this, do that, do this, do that. I mean, you could say that, but it's deeper than that. We can turn it into that and say, oh, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do that, follow the Shastras, now you're going to be a better person. But really what it is, it's talking about the structure and nature of existence and the rules, Scotty, to use your word, which is a great one, you know, of how to function in this prapancham in a manner that will facilitate your moving beyond the limitations of perspective.
Can it also, like the Dharma part of it, saying that, there's all these, like, you're enlightened, you have, all of this down, but your Dharma is like when you still have karma and you're not there. These are the Dharma is those qualities that are as close to enlightenment that you can get, are the most alive qualities in you. So
Yeah, see that you're asking a really deep question there, and that is sort of like, if I'm hearing you correctly, you can correct me if I'm not, but if I'm hearing you correctly, it's kind of like, well, what is the life of somebody like Lord Krishna like? You could say Jesus, depending on who you believe Jesus was, and
well, let's take like Jesus, like you said.
okay.
What I'm talking about there was like Jesus. He could turn water into wine, bread. He could make whatever, those things that he was most in close connected to. Whatever he was following his dharma by using these attributes that he had. He knew how he was programmed, and I use these things to to the fullest. So,
All right. So here's kind of how that worked.
Yeah.
Let's assume, and I say it this way because I don't want people, oh, they don't believe Jesus is this, or oh no, I'm sure Jesus was that. I'm trying to get around that. So let's just say a truly fully enlightened individual. Okay.
Right.
What do we got there? What we really have there is that, you see, what happens is at some point it's just not the consciousness that evolves, but it's actually the tissues of the body, and they become more and more refined and more subtle. You see, to the point where in a material sense, they don't even exist anymore. They're not really there.
Right.
And so what is there? Okay, we have this karma, so this dance of karma that creates this universe of perspectives. But what is it rooted in? It's rooted in something that lies beyond perspective. It's rooted in something that lies beyond karma. It's rooted in something that is pure isness, pure being, pure kaivalya, if you will, chaitanya, And so in that sense, then we're spinning around something that doesn't exist. We're spinning around no thingness. We're spinning around that which is beyond mind. And so in that sense, who are these great, truly great enlightened beings? They don't really exist in the physical material sense that human beings exist. And so what it is, it's the dance around them that creates the image of them. Does that make sense, Scott?
Yeah.
Oh, good. And so I compare it to like the sun. If this analogy helps, I don't know. We kind of look at the sun like it's this globe in space radiating out light and everything, and so it's a source of. And yes, you can say that, but in a deeper sense, and interestingly enough, somebody ran this by an astrophysicist, and they agreed with this, which is pretty amazing. But in a deeper sense, it's a convergence point. Everything converges onto that, kind of like with a welder. When they weld, you got this spot welding beam that's hitting a point on the metal, but then it's radiating out. Really, what it is, it's a convergence in, and the radiating out is sort of a side effect, but that's what we see. And like that, if you talk about a great enlightened being, take your pick, Krishna, Buddha, Christ, they're convergence points that radiate out because they're so central to the very essence of the nature of life. You see?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Now that's one. That's
Sir, yes, sir. That certainly is. Yeah.
for us mere mortals. Does that kind of go into like, like let's say there's some great pianist or you know
Yeah.
is it does that have to do with like following your dharma is like following that which is most in line with natural law too, or something like that, where like you see these great violinists or pianists or great business people, they're following their dharma are those attributes that
Yeah.
allow that to blossom in that I'm
Right. And so, in that sense, it's a whole karmic dynamic.
yeah,
Uh, and if you're doing your dharma, you're acting in a manner that facilitates your ability to live in harmony with that which lies beyond relativity.
yeah,
Yeah, it's kind of like that. But now you see, here's the interesting thing, and it's kind of like, I guess one reason the Will Smith thing touched me is the way it did was because what are we doing here at Mount Soma? At Mount Soma, and any place that's trying to bring in that influence of uh, Kaivalya, that influence of Chaitanya, uh, um, and radiate it out to the planet. It's like, and I've talked about this before, Scotty, but positive attracts negative. Yin creates yang, up creates down, left creates right. That's the nature of relativity. And so if you're functioning in, of, and by, for, through as a karmic being, because keep in mind, karma isn't just something outside of you. Most of your karma is in your head and in your heart. It's how you function. It's how you view the world. It's all about perspective, your perspective. And so if you view even something, well, let's take it to an extreme like Krishna or Christ. Look what they did to Christ. They crucified him. Positive attracts negative. He's a very positive influence that's radiating out to the planet. And viewed from another perspective, then Christ was just another perspective. He had his perspective, and it wasn't consistent with the Romans' perspective. So it creates a conflict. So what happens? The negative attacks the positive. Now, does the negative sit there and say, oh, I'm negative, I'm negative, I'm negative, and so there's something positive over there, I'm going to attack it? Of course not. But it's a mode of function of existence. The world needs two poles to spin around, you see? And positive and negative. And the greater the power of the positive, the greater charge becomes the negative. And that's the world that we're functioning in. That's why we have a tradition of crucifying our saints, attacking things that are good and wholesome. And why do we do that? Because we think our perspective is the right one and it's good and wholesome. And we cling to that belief. And we cling even to our beliefs about Vedanta is the point, and what we think it is. And it's also compromising, Does that make sense, Scotty?
absolutely. Yeah.
And so why are we talking about, is this all so hypothetical, so theoretical, rather, so abstract? Why do I need to think about this? And how does that help me with the perspective on Will Smith or the Ukraine or Putin or Marine Le Pen in France and all that? The most the way to align with a healthier perspective isn't by trying to find the right perspective. It's about resting into a deeper level of your being. And that's not something you can just say, oh, okay, I'm going to take 10 deep breaths and I'm going to just rest into my divinity. Okay, now I'm divine and what's my perspective? And that's my perspective. Therefore, I found truth. No, and that's what we do such exquisite knowledges like Vedanta and stuff. It's a process of cultivating the awareness, cultivating the physiology. It's a state of being. It's not a state of attitude or philosophy. And when we understand that, then we become more humble. And humility is the flip side of wisdom. And you might think, well, if you're established in Vedanta, or if you're established in Kaivalya, if you're established in Chaitanya, if you're established in that which dwells beyond relativity, then how can you perform action? Don't you see that it's all futile? Well, it's such a contradiction. It's such a paradox. It's a paradoxical nature of things. You're beyond it all, but you're still in it. You're in the world, but not of it. You're functioning in the world. And just when you're functioning from that place, you're so spontaneously facilitating the evolution of the whole planet. But at the same time, people don't view you as, oh, this great being. Some will, some won't. It depends on what perspective they have, you see. But you act with passion. I like to say when you're enlightened, you still have a full range of human emotions, a full range of attitudes and feelings and thoughts. But nevertheless, it's now rooted in something that's beyond relativity. You're in the field of relativity, functioning in the relativity in accord with the rules, Scotty, of relativity, but you're not lost to it. And so in that sense, you could even say that you see the absurdity of your own words even as you speak them with conviction. And now somebody can say, oh yeah, well, I can do that now. So does that mean I'm enlightened? Well, no, you just turned it into a perspective. Is that making sense, Scott?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
And that's the thing I think everybody needs to understand too, is that there is a propensity for us to fall back on collapsing down and white knuckling onto those perspectives. You know, it's a sticky, like you talked before, it's sticky.
There you go. Yeah. No, that's well said, Scotty. And so then we can take a step back and look at Will Smith and what's happening. Because does that mean because he slapped that guy that he's not established in his own being? Well, we might jump to say yes. And quite frankly, I don't think he is. But nevertheless, if he was, we wouldn't know it, because we would be viewing that action from our own perspective. And see, now you can get into trouble. Well, then is it a no holds barred, anything goes, you know, I know nothing and therefore how can I judge anything? Well, no, because we do, even in the state of full enlightenment, perform action, have an attitude, do our dharma in that sense, you know. And see, so if we really get into even something like Vedanta, we can get really confused if we're trying to dissect it. And get it intellectually, you know, even getting it intellectually, I call that the I get it syndrome, you know. So why are we even talking about it? Well, this helps hopefully loosen the grip of our own identities. It does facilitate the process, but the number one thing that facilitates the process is of transformation of the physiology into being established in our own being. Number one is proper meditation. And also that's what we're doing here at Mount Soma, building this technology that will radiate that influence of being, pure divinity, if you will, out to the environment. And it's a science. Somebody said to me the other day, well, can we build a Buddhist temple here at Mount Soma? And it's, in one sense, oh yeah, why not? You know, but no. And here's why. Because, well, what I told him was, I said that you can have a Ford F-150 and you can have a Porsche, and they're both great and they're both fine. But you can't take the carburetor out of a Ford F-150 and replace the carburetor in the Porsche with that carburetor. It won't work. See, these are technologies. And they're very specific. Just because something is a transistor doesn't mean you can rip a transistor out of your cell phone and stick that in and have it work. No, it's a very precise technology. And what happens when you do that then is positives attracting negative, and so it gets attacked from all different angles and all these different perspectives, and that becomes a huge obstacle to building something like this. A huge obstacle. Why? Because the positive force would be so huge that it's attracting tremendous level of negativity. And again, the people who are having negativity aren't saying, oh, I'm going to be negative, or no, they're saying, I'm living my truth. This is my perspective. This is what's really going on. And from their perspective, you see? And so that's why they say to even build a Shiva temple, let alone to build an enlightened city, the obstacles are formidable, because the grasp of perspective is so powerful on the mentality of the people. And all you have to do is watch the news. That's why I like to watch a conservative news station and a liberal news station, especially when they're talking about the same thing. The perspectives are so diametrically opposed, and they're both speaking them out with such conviction. And it's all about what we're talking about here. It's the world of perspective. And to really have a healthy perspective, you have to see beyond all that and come from a place of no perspective, but nevertheless be in the world functioning, but not lost to it. I think that says it, Scotty.
Yeah.
Is that good enough? All right, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that. It's a lot of food for thought, I would imagine. And thanks for listening. And we'll talk with you again next week.